It's Friday, June 5, and this is your Barbados Today Evening News Update. Government eases its strict restrictions on the resumption of church services with immediate effect. Church leaders had raised strong objections to the measures that included no communion and the wearing of masks. The two sides have been meeting over the last few days, and at a news conference this evening, Social Relations Minister Colin Jordan announced the changes.
I'm announcing that masks can be removed while persons are ministering in places of worship, so that when the reader is reading the lesson or the prayer, that person can do it after removing their mask. We know that some people will keep theirs on, but we are allowing persons to remove their mask when they do that. If a person is singing, that person can remove their mask. The person who is preaching, that person can remove their mask. So those persons who are ministering from the platform, the pulpit, can remove their mask while they are ministering. We are in this, when we allow for a mask to be removed while ministering, we're saying that a person who is preaching or singing, because of the increased expression of ear, that there should be a distance of 12 feet rather than 6. Persons over the age, or persons 70 years and older, persons 70 years or older can attend regular services. For the communion service, we have agreed that the communion service can take place once there is no contact between worshippers or between the officiant and a worshipper. That is the general statement. There are some examples that I will use, but the general statement is that the communion service can take place once there is no physical contact, as in physical touching of one person and another.
A leading Caribbean economist wants the Barbados government to take its bond offer to public officers a step further by allowing these workers to buy ownership in state-owned profit-making entities. Dr. Justin Ram, a former director of economics at the Caribbean Development Bank, who now heads the consultancy, Justin Ram Advisory Services, says the Barbados Optional Savings Scheme is a good start, but it should also include the option to allow holders of the bonds to convert them to equity in operations, such as the Grantley Adams International Airport. He was speaking today at the Sagicor Cahill School of Business webinar titled Perspectives on Economic Growth.
Let's say, for example, if the resources were used to improve the port or the airport in Barbados, then maybe that average individual could then have a small equity stake in the airport, and then we encourage the airport to become a lot more profitable, let's say. And at the same time, those profits are now feeding back to the citizens of Barbados. So that's just an example. I think that what we could consider as we go forward is that we have conversion clauses towards equity, and that does two really good things. We now do what we're saying here in this webinar, that we need to give people a larger equity stake in the economy. And at the same time, because it's no longer debt, it has been converted from debt into equity, the debt is wiped off of the government's books. So it actually does a really good thing in that you allow people to now utilize their resources, take an investment stake. The government gets the money to do major capital works, which it needs to do, but the government doesn't have to pay that back, because now this person has an equity stake in an asset that they can earn a rate of return on, as long as that asset is performing well.
Sir Anthony Bryan, owner and publisher of the island's oldest newspaper, the Barbados Advocate, has passed away. In a notice on the company's Facebook page, the Advocate said he died this afternoon at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. He reportedly had been ailing for an unspecified period. Prime Minister May Motley paid tribute to Sir Anthony, saying he made a substantial contribution to the country through his ownership of The Advocate, as well as radio stations BBS 90.7 FM and Faith 102 FM. He's survived by 3 sons and a number of grandchildren. All systems are go for a protest march tomorrow near the U.S. Embassy over the killing of an African-American man by a white police officer in the U.S. The The demonstration is being organized by the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration, the 13th June 1980 movement, and noted attorney-at-law Lalu Hanneman. Only 10 people in masks, armed with hand sanitizer and practicing social distancing, have been allowed to participate in the protests. But organizer David Denny says provisions are in place to allow Barbadians to participate as much as possible.
This action will last for 2 hours. So a group of 10 can come, participate, spend about 10 minutes, go. Next group of 10 come, participate for about 10 minutes and go, so that we can create the condition for many Barbadian people and friends who want to participate in this process to express Barbados' solidarity with the African people in the United States of America.
There's no reason for the Caribbean to abandon the tourism sector. That's the view of former Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, Hugh Riley. There has been robust debate on the need for Caribbean countries to diversify their economies in light of the massive fallout in the sector triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Riley, who participated in the Sagicor Cahill School of Business webinar titled Perspectives on Economic Growth, says while countries should develop as much sectors as possible, the Caribbean's competitive advantage in tourism simply cannot be ignored.
If our economies are diversified in all kinds of other ways, if people find, oil and gas or whatever, and start to diversify our economies that way, and all of our eggs are not in any single basket, of course, it's a win-win for everyone. Nobody wants all of their eggs to be in any single basket. But let us not forget that tourism provides an enormous competitive advantage for the Caribbean. Our countries have God-given assets. Look, earlier in the discussion, we talked about the fact that in 2019, the Caribbean was pacing ahead of the rest of the world in terms of tourism arrivals. Now, 2019 is the past, but the fact of the matter is that you can't ignore that the Caribbean is highly competitive in that particular arena. We can't abandon that. Look for the ways to take full advantage of it while we also search for oil in the ground.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To regional happenings, voters in St. Kitts and Nevis are awaiting the outcome of today's general elections. Thousands flocked to the 129 polling stations across the Twin Islands state, where protocols were in place to protect them from the COVID-19 pandemic. More than 35,000 voters in St. Kitts and over 12,000 in Nevis were eligible to cast ballots in the poll that was being observed by a 3-member CARICOM observer team. The election is a straight fight between the ruling coalition Team Unity, led by Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris, and the main opposition St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, headed by former Prime Minister Dr. Denzel Douglas. The parties are both fielding 17 candidates, and they are confident of victory. In addition, the 3 seats on Nevis will be contested by 6 candidates representing the Concerned Citizens Movement and the Nevis Reformation Party. On the international front, the mayor of Washington, D.C. had the slogan Black Lives Matter painted in massive yellow letters on a street leading to the White House on Friday, in tribute to victims of police brutality as she sparred with U.S. President Donald Trump. More in this report from Reuters Television.
Washington, D.C. city workers painted the words Black Lives Matter in massive yellow letters right onto the streets of the American Capitol on Friday. The statement by City Hall is the latest rebuke to the White House, amid demonstrations that have seen clashes between federal police and protesters. Trump on Friday defended the crackdown on demonstrators.
Have to dominate the streets. You can't let what's happening happen.
A day earlier, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said she wanted the federal government to withdraw outside forces brought in response to the protests.
We want the military, we want troops from out of state, out of Washington, D.C.
This week saw the deployment of Washington, D.C. National Guard, along with several hundred active duty troops from the 82nd Airborne Division. Guardsmen were en route to Washington from 10 other states. And protesters found themselves facing an array of other federal law enforcement agencies, including Customs and Border Protection, the Bureau of Prisons, and the Transportation Security Administration. Some of the officers wore uniforms with no discernible insignias, raising questions about their identity and mission. Federal officers conducted the now notorious operation, cracking down on protesters earlier in the week, deploying smoke and pepper balls to clear part of a park near the White House so that President Donald Trump, Attorney General William Barr, and other officials could stage a photo op at a nearby church. The American Civil Liberties Union and other groups filed a lawsuit on Thursday on behalf of the protesters, seeking an order declaring that Trump, Barr, and other officials violated their constitutional rights. Barr on Thursday said that operation was necessary to create a buffer between demonstrators and the White House.
That's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.